Hello, Chris.
Hey, Paul, how you doing?
I'm doing good, and all the better to say it's close to the weekend, as close as we're going to get before we actually slip into it. And looking forward to speaking with tonight's guest. And I know you are. He's a friend as well as just an incredible researcher. So get your questions ready, people, and hit him with anything you've got because he thinks outside of the box.
Yeah, I think we're going to get. I think you're right. I think we're going to get a lot of questions for Nathaniel tonight. I think he's a very popular guest, always on all the podcasts that he does. And I think absolutely, like we've talked about it before, it's refreshing actually to have not a new mind because Nathaniel's been around, he's long enough. It's just he's sort of got one foot out of demonology now, and into we'll call it phenomenology if you like. He wouldn't. He's got his own. He's got his own lingo, and we'll talk about that. So yeah, it's cool. Great.
Such a bleed through, Chris, isn't there, with what Nathaniel does, and it bleeds through to all other genres of unexplained phenomena. Whether you're stuck in that box of ufology or that box of cryptids, it can't be helped. Everything bleeds into one another, and he understands this. But
yeah, I don't think. Well, you know what? I don't think we've there's this cycle in ufology. I think where we've been going round and round and back to the start and round and back to the start. I don't think that's going to happen now.
No,
my personal opinion is I think we've reached a point where there's change. I can feel it. You can feel it in the genre. It just feels different.
Public perception of the subject as well, and the openness to stop and listen instead of just rolling your eyebrows and go, you know what I mean? There's something there. People are taking notice.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
I like that. I love that aspect of it. But before we get Nathaniel on, because I'm looking now, because we'll be going on for like towards 100 people in chat. Should we say a few shout outs? I see Alison's in. Great to see you, Alison. Ginge, Diane Farrell, Tonya Morrison, Andy Decodes, Karen Bierman, Mike the Disabled Welshman, Stargazer Eternal, Dragonborn, Deb Shaw. Great to see you guys. Honestly, I'm looking forward to speaking with some of you face to face at this forthcoming conference. Simon Riley, let's have a look. Rivington Pipe Beast, that's Lee. Zero Dawn. I can only see a small selection of people, so I do apologise. But Ginge, Margaret Webster, I have to stop me, and let's get on with it.
Yeah, let's bring Nathaniel on.
Hi, Nathaniel.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me on again. It's always great to be with you guys.
Well, it's just brilliant, and as I say, I look upon you as a great friend, and I know Chris thinks the same. But for anybody that's not familiar with your work, all I can say is that they're going to have their eyes open tonight, and they'll want to hear more of you. So I would say Nathaniel Gillis, fast becoming known as one of the most foremost researchers who thinks outside of the box within the realms of supernatural and unexplained phenomena. And if new ideas are going to come forward, it's going to come from people with minds like yours. Welcome from me and Chris.
Thank you, guys. I love you guys to death. You're some of my favorite people in the world, and it's an honor to join you tonight.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, Nathaniel, I just wanted to ask you, last year you spoke at the Awakening conference, didn't you? And I just wanted to, yes. What's the last, not because of Awakening, just because of what's going on in the world. What's the last 12 months been like for you? Have you also sensed that change in the movement?
The conversation is definitely shifting into a more metaphysical, interdimensional direction. And I think that's where the conversation needs to be. I'm tired of hearing about the extraterrestrial hypothesis personally. It doesn't make any sense to me, especially if we consider that the first time we contacted these beings, or they contacted us, was by virtue of seances and Ouija boards. And so if anything, in the last 12 months, the conversation has changed in the direction of phenomenology, where I think it needs to be. And I think perhaps that's the best way to sit with the question right now.
Yeah.
Do you feel, I mean, I know we just talked off there briefly about, some of the big podcasters touching on this subject now. In fact, all the big but isn't that weird? All the massive podcasters, the most popular podcasts in the world, are all talking about this subject. I mean, there's a message there. But what are your thoughts about why that is, where this is going?
Well, I think that there is some, form of disclosure trying to occur, but there seems to be two factions within the government that are telling two different stories. One story, according to Diana Walsh-Pasuka, is, number one, that the whistleblowers we're seeing aren't the real whistleblowers, that there seems to be other individuals that are underneath the water, like an iceberg, that have been filling her ears on what they think the phenomenon is. And their answer is pretty much demonic. Literally push them back to religion. I'm talking atheists all the way back to Catholicism. And so that was just I just heard that the other day, or actually yesterday,
Really?
when she was on Sean Ryan's podcast. She kind of let that one go, and she was kind of sheepish about it too. She's like, but yeah, so those whistleblowers are not the ones we're seeing in front of Congress giving hearings. These are the whistleblowers from aerospace, right? They're pulling her aside, and basically, in her words, not mine, it scared her, and that it's not okay. There's something really wrong. And so, and on the other side, though, we have people like Luis Elizondo, who is right. He's completely pushing the ET narrative. And so I think that somewhere, perhaps the truth is somewhere in the middle, that it's not extraterrestrial, it is interdimensional, and perhaps has been here for a long time.
So are you saying there's kind of a Collins Elite vibe going on then, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Even down to her discussing how these aerospace engineers were pretty much either atheist or agnostic. And after they discovered, by virtue of the scientific method, once they discovered what we're dealing with, it pushed them towards religion. And so we have these two factions in the federal government that are almost warring over disclosure. Do we tell the world what we think they are? Right? Or do we continue to control the narrative, and by virtue of asking the wrong questions, keep getting the wrong answers? My point here, though, gentlemen, is that phenomenology reigns supreme in approaching whatever this intelligence is. And with that said, it's not just phenomenology, but you have to have the width and breadth of knowledge of phenomenology to even be able to discuss what we're researching. And so I think that when you have these experiencers and researchers in the field that compartmentalize it, it's only because they don't know phenomenology. If they knew phenomenology, they would realize that all of this kind of aligns itself into something that appears, at least from my perspective, to be a singular intelligence incarnating as various archetypes to manipulate our species.
Do you think? Sorry, Chris, go on.
No, I was just gonna. You asked this question, Paul.
Well,
I was just gonna ask. Yeah,
it's not as much a question as, do you think, though, when this levels out, and when we've like you've just said, Lou Alonso, he's for the ET hypothesis, and other people are going down towards the religious route, and the more I would say demonic type of entities that might be interacting. Do you think we're going to end up where we were at, say, 10 years ago, with people just boxing their particular type of interest and their particular genre, and we're just going to go back to it, and we're going to be battling over that rather than getting to the truth?
Absolutely. And I don't know that we want the truth. I mean, we're still trying to understand how powerful this intelligence is. If we're talking about a species that can literally dematerialize a person from their office, which Richard Doty just came out with about the general, I think it was, or a colonel, where he just disappeared in the Pentagon. He's gone. He did not scan out of his office. The cameras did not show him leaving. He's just gone. And then they came back the next day, and he's back in his office in the same clothes he was wearing the night before. If we're talking about that species, then now even the demonic hypothesis cannot really encapsulate what we're dealing with. It's something so beyond reality that it would not be an invasion in terms of aliens on the White House lawn. It would be something that is hacking reality itself. And I know that's deep, but it's disturbing.
How recent is the Doty story?
I think it was on a month ago.
Really?
I'll have to email it to you.
No knowledge of it. Chris may have. Yeah.
No, I was going to ask you, Nathaniel, for those that don't know much about Collins Elite, could you give us just a brief overview about what they were doing?
Yeah, so the Collins Elite, to my knowledge, originated in the 1950s after Jack Parsons and Crowley performed their rituals. And this was a group of aerospace engineers and physicists from the Department of Defense. They kind of got together and they started asking a really profound question in my mind. And that was, did Jack Parsons and Aleister Crowley perform a ritual and create a portal? Sorry, I turned my phone. Create a portal for entities to manifest in this dimension. And so that's what they did. I mean, you're talking about PhDs everywhere. And all they were doing was traveling the entire globe looking for case studies of contactees. And so one of their case studies was Paul Garrett, who was he was a guitarist. He worked at I think it was a race car shop or some kind of racing shop. Anyways, he was a guitarist, and he had a near-death experience and went out of his body, and he saw that there were these metallic objects hovering over people in the crowd, and it was like pulling what was considered to be an orb out of their bodies into the craft, and then the craft would leave. But their idea was that at the end of all the research, their concept of the phenomenon was that it is demonic, it is parasitic, and that these are essentially soul hunters. And what I find so interesting about all of this is Diana Walsh Pasuka's response, right? You're talking about scientists who, whatever they discovered in their research, pushed them back to religion. It was an existential response to whatever they encountered. And I think that shows us where we are right now in the conversation.
Absolutely.
So that's an interesting, because it's interesting that you talked about the soul aspect of this, and the consciousness aspect of this, because that obviously gets that is a very, very common thing in ET abduction. Many witnesses, whistleblowers have talked about seeing the soul extraction type thing. Many people have talked about and it's actually come up very recently in a podcast about walking towards the light, that's an artificial construct itself, part of this soul matrix trap. Have you any thoughts on that?
There are some ancient texts that speak of a species of necromancers that had that ability. By virtue of technology, they would extract consciousness from the body. I believe that is happening to a degree, not just in the UFO abduction phenomenon, and not to get to some of my older stuff, but with the case study of the remote viewer, right? For those who aren't familiar with that case study of mine, he was a gentleman who was getting paid. He would remote view and go out of his body and meet his guides. They would give him insights and he would get back into his body. Well, he met entities that appeared to be his guides, and they weren't at all. And what they actually did was somehow, and I don't understand this, I don't claim to, but it was almost like they carved religious amulets or sigils into his consciousness. And then once he returned back to his body, it manifested from underneath the skin to the surface. So whatever we're dealing with, specifically with that species, it would be something akin to initiates, interdimensional initiates of some kind of mystery school. And I think that's why the community now doesn't know how to probe that. They don't know how to articulate that, because it is interdimensional, but they are practitioners in and of themselves. And I think that's really what the Collins Elite discovered. That's just my opinion. I think that's what Diana Walsh Pasuka realized too, was that we don't even have a finger to point at them, because there's no way for us to quantify them verbally. What are they?
And whatever they are, Nathaniel, let's assume they've been happy. We don't know what their thought process is, but they've been quite happy, I would think, to see us going down the road that we've gone down for the past 40 to 50 years in that line of research. And now I think we're probably looking at it from the right direction. And even now, there'll be other methods that these other intelligences, these unknown others, will be conjuring up and trying to conceive that will lead us down another rabbit hole and a blank corridor kind of thing. And do you see that happening?
Yes, it appears that the phenomenon is controlled disclosure. And this is what's also just mind-boggling to me. If this is a primeval intelligence, then we know less. We know, I guess, as little now that we did thousands of years ago. And so you're talking about a presence in this world that has existed for thousands of years, but has been able to control the narrative, has been able to manage our perception of it. And I could get into that too, but it's fascinating to me. I mean, it is evolving according to our awareness of it. And there are aspects of invoking that the phenomenon is introducing, and that's the CE5 movement, which is fascinating to me as well.
And do you think it's led us throughout our evolution, throughout our progression? Do you think it's introduced things to lead us in the direction that it wants us to go?
Oh, absolutely. It is in control. There's no way around that. And I think that's one of the more disturbing aspects of what we're dealing with. It's even down to the concept of free will. Are we in some kind of matrix? Is this a simulation? And are we dealing with some form of artificial habitat to where these entities who have literally created the fabric of reality are incarnating into this dimension, moving things around, right? And then leaving. And the only thing we're left with are remnants of archetypes, ghosts, cryptids, right? Guides, not realizing that this very well could be a species, again, that, and this is thinking outside the box, I guess, but that is hacking reality itself.
Yeah.
It's not just alien abduction. It's literally playing by rules that we are in complete ignorance of and have been in ignorance of for thousands of years.
Chris,
Nathaniel, Dragonborn's just asking though, what got you into demonology, and for you, what does it entail exactly? That's actually quite interesting, because how would you, if you hadn't, as a demonologist, did you come into ufology like brand new, or did you realize that it all just sort of, there were too many coincidences, too many correlations? Is that what you saw?
Yes, but it started early on for me, my friend. That analysis, if you will, started when I was 8 years old. When I had I witnessed that full-bodied apparition, and I wondered, how can I place this young girl? Who is she? Did she belong to a neighborhood, or at least a neighbor in the neighborhood? She didn't. And so what I realized was the same little girl that incarnated in that room was also the same shadow figure that stared at me at nighttime, was also the two voices conversing above my head. So again, at 8 years old, I had the ability to compartmentalize the phenomenon. But what I realized was that the phenomenon was evolving according to my awareness of it. And so it's almost, again, with the guides archetype, it switches hands, it switches interfaces in order to control and weaponize our behavior. And that's something that I learned early on. And then I got into the incubi literature, and I realized that it's even deeper, right? Where these beings can actually take the face of anybody or anything. And you'd think, okay, that's Uncle Ted, that's dear Aunt Edna. It's not. It's the proto-intelligence wearing that interface in order to manipulate. So that happened early on. And then it was from that springboard that I evolved into Jewish demonology and the debug phenomenon. Then I went into kind of some more incubi literature, which bled, really, here's the connection to ufology, bled right into hybridization. Right. That's when I realized, wait a minute, we're being manipulated. These are not separate phenomena, right? And I could say this too as well, like what in some of my earliest cases when I was doing investigations, I would often go into homes and I would think that there were two co-present intelligences. Right, I would encounter like something that appeared to be demonic, and then something else that was completely different. And so early on in my research, I thought these are co-present entities. I didn't realize only after encountering it did I see how it wasn't co-present. It was one intelligence wearing the other as a mask. And what's happening again, especially with newer researchers, is that they encounter something like that, not realizing that at any moment the phenomenon can switch archetypes, and that proto-intelligence incarnates, and whatever that is, my friends, has no rules. And I don't know if it fears anything even. It doesn't make any sense.
And there's no compassion. There's it's totally cold, isn't it? To me, I mean, it doesn't mean you're right or I'm right, but what you're saying is so on point. When I wrote Night People, and the things that I saw in childhood, I didn't pick up on it as quickly as you did. I genuinely didn't. But I've now come to thinking, probably, I don't know, last 10 years or so, that the beings that I thought were good were the same type, one in the same. Good cop, bad cop. Do you know what I mean? But we're still, at the end of the day, we're dealing with the same entity, the same unknown other. It's just working towards its own end for what it wants from Nathaniel, Chris, everybody in chat who these things interfere with and react with. So it's so on point, Nathaniel. It's brilliant.
It's exceedingly dangerous to interact with some of these beings because, and I've kind of been toying with this theory as well, but I do not agree that the phenomenon responds based upon our intentions with it. I've never agreed with that. I do not believe the data set says that. What I am seeing, though, is that there is the interface that it wears, right? It does pick images out of our minds and then applies it to its own incarnation. So you'd think, okay, yeah, that is an angel, right? Until it stops acting like an angel. What that means is, yes, that we do play a role in how it manifests, up until that proto-intelligence manifests, and then it does what it wants, and then afterwards just leaves. And so I don't know what it is, but I do lean more towards a parasitic symbiotic species that self-replicates and incarnates by virtue of ritual magic. And I know that's a mouthful, but that's where I'm at.
So it's interesting, Nathaniel. You're saying that there is a hybridization program. It's just not in the way we thought.
No. And that's because of ufology. You know, ufology seemed to kind of corner that field of the research, not realizing again that hybridization has a rich history and antiquity. And it began by virtue of possession and pregnancy. I know that's my old stuff, but that's where the question is right now. It was never about the DNA. It was always about the implantation of consciousness into fetuses. Guys, the Hebrew word for golem means fetus. The golem of ritual magic, where they carved amulets and sigils into the body, that meant fetus. And so even there we have the hybridization program mingling with ritual magic. We just didn't know, again, because ufology is now trying to dominate the question. And if anybody's followed my research, remember what I said, if they can dominate the question, they're going to give you the answer they want.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
you touched on, go on, Chris, sorry,
Paul. No, go on, you're all right.
No, well, no, because I think what you're going to ask is relevant. I'm just going to go back a few steps. So carry on, Chris.
Yeah, I've lost my track. Then.
I'm
going me off.
So you touched on these things presenting as, say, an angel, and then obviously we've not seen the true face of what it is. But where does that leave a person if they believe, if they've had contact, and it is the genuine form, the genuine celestial body? Surely these things are still there, aren't they? You know, not everything is what you're talking about within your research.
Not at all. I mean, anybody that knows me, brother,
I know this. I'm just
the darker aspect, yeah. And I don't want people to get caught up in that either. You know, I'm not saying it's all bad. I'm just more interested in the pathology of what is bad and the darker nuances of it. But yeah, it does seem to be parasitic, and I am starting to see evidence that the CE5 is literally the invocation of whatever this species is. And I think that I think at least in the next decade or so, we're going to have case studies to prove our theories that we're not in control of the conjurings. We're not in control of the invocations. Something else is guiding our species into communicating with whatever they are. And I do believe it's exceedingly dangerous because, again, the only rules we believe they followed, they told us. Mm-hmm. And it's a kind of a sad series of events, but that's where we are right now, at least from my perspective.
So why can't they just communicate then, Nathaniel? Are we being guided in a form of worship,
yes,
in the direction that people are trying to make contact and get this information from the unknown other? Because if they're all so powerful, which we know they are, why can't they just simply communicate and convey what they want? Is there a certain pathway that we have to follow or that people have to follow, do you think?
There we go. You hit the nail on the head, my friend. These seem to be mostly involuntary initiatory practices. I mean, even Matthew Roberts, who was a pilot that witnessed the gimbal UAP, this is phenomenal. This blew my mind. After the initial event, he went back to his personal quarters and a voice came to him to start redefining his own experience. How? What's going on, right? You guys are getting me passionate. So yeah, he's talking to this entity, and this entity is literally pointing him back to the occult. Literally, he said, it's crazy. He said that this entity was whispering to him and told him certain authors to read and certain books to buy. So when people hear me in lectures saying that the phenomenon is managing our perception of it, it's right then and there. It's crazy.
Nathaniel, excuse me. Have you given any thought to the fact that this could potentially be some form of ancient AI wanting to inhabit?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So there is, with respect to the entities, there is a learning matrix installed. The only way I can put it. You know, the case study of the experiencer I worked with as a kid. She's a little girl, right? The entity manifested as a cartoon. Well, when she got older, it wasn't a cartoon. You know, she didn't watch the cartoons, didn't read the comic books, but the phenomenon was still incarnating as the cartoon. So the evolutionary stages had not caught up to her. Right? When I say the phenomenon evolves according to our awareness of it. And so when it manifested as the cartoon character, the learning matrix kept trying to update and it wasn't working. And so this is why I say that a lot of these incarnations are the byproduct of us. Just the mask, though, not the independent entity wearing it. But yes, it does seem to have not just a learning matrix, but a distributed brain. You know, when we're dealing with these grays, specifically in the Rendlesham Forest case, Peter Robbins talks about how all of these entities seem to share a singular consciousness to the point that when they were lifted up into craft, all of them looked up at the same time. So AI, I don't know. Sounds like it.
Yeah, Brett's asked an interesting question. It's just this is a very Brett question, relevant as well, actually. Does Nathaniel think it's possible that there is life, other civilizations beyond the snow and ice of Antarctica, and NASA was set up to make us, you know, NASA's just part of this theater? Do you think there's anything to that?
I've read a little bit about that. I would not be surprised, especially not just in Antarctica, but in the oceans. Some of the UAPs that have been manifesting there are just earth-shattering, you know. But I do kind of lean towards. I mean, if you think about it, guys, if we're dealing with a species that's been co-present with us throughout history, it has to exist somewhere we're not aware of, right? Deep in the ocean, out in Antarctica, in the rainforest, somewhere that we don't, you know, we don't encounter it too often. So it would not surprise me at all.
Or simply just in another dimension.
That's more where I'm at, my friend. I mean,
if
we're dealing with something that can literally dematerialize, materialize, dematerialize, we don't even have vocabulary for that.
Have you ever got within? I know, because you branch off and you're constantly thinking of and coming up with new theories and new ideas, and that's the only way forward as far as I can see it, Nathaniel. But have you ever felt that you've got so close that you can actually feel that you've irritated something, you've got under the skin of the unknown other? Have you ever felt that presence around you?
Oh yeah, it's horrible. I can remember reading an academic paper on what was called fetus magic in Mesopotamia in relation to the hybridization program, which there is a connection, and I don't want to get you guys demonetized, but there is a connection.
Please
And
don't.
I know, right? In the middle of reading the paper, all of a sudden I could feel something looking at me, and it was just okay. And a few days, actually 2 hours later, I got 2 different emails from experiencers. Both of them told me that their guides wanted me to know that they'll be waiting for me when I die. That's when I was like, I'm like, oh my God. Yeah. And then there was another time where I was just still doing a little deeper research than usual, not the usual, you know, connecting dots with the phenomenon. And I got a message from an experiencer that Dr. Carla Turner had worked with for many years. And he said that in the night, a voice came to him and said, stop talking about necronetics. Leave Nathaniel Gillis alone. Don't even mention his name. So there have been times, right, where you look into the phenomenon and it comes at a cost, because when you are experiencing it, you're the one being experienced. And sometimes, you know, it's like, I hope I survive this.
Yeah. And obviously go as deep as or as light as you want with this one. And does it interfere with members of the family? Do they feel it as well, or do you try? It's hard to keep things separate when you're so as entrenched.
It is. It is. So that's why I'm single. You know, I don't date. I don't have a girlfriend. I don't have that kind of family. But there have been manifestations around my mother. My mother went outside about 2 years ago now. And I was just visiting them, and she said that she went outside the back, and out of nowhere, this ball of light materialized, and it just kind of followed her in the woods, and then it just left. And she asked me, she goes, "What is that?" And I'm like, I don't know. But now knowing what, you know, Lou Elizondo and Jay Stratton and A-Tip and all of them experienced with the orbs, it makes perfect sense. So yeah, and it gets back to the way the phenomenon manages perception. If you get too close, it is, and people don't want to hear this, but this is the truth. It has a way of correcting. Barbara Bartholic, when she was doing reverse, I think it was memory hypnosis and all that, they told her, you're due for an adjustment. And that very day, she was in almost a nearly fatal car accident. I believe it was her husband that died. Even Dr. Carla Turner, when she got too close, they took her. They took her and told her, listen, you're getting way too close to this. We may have to step in and do something. And so I believe 100% that our government knows that. But, you know, you can't sell T-shirts with that narrative, right? They have
what's the closeness? Why can you be too close? Is it because you've got a voice and you can influence other people, or the population? Because, or is she just too close, and just the singular, just Dr. Carla Turner is enough?
She was a force to be reckoned with. But what she was getting close to, again, was not just the abductions and involuntary initiations, but it was the aspect of human trafficking that she was covering. And what I'm realizing more and more is that the reason the phenomenon has been able to coexist for thousands of years with our species is because it's plucked people out that got too close. If you say something I don't like, we're going to have a problem. That's the way it's not only control the narrative, but that's the way it's kind of veiled its parasitic nature in the world for that long of a time. Yeah.
Yeah. Stephen's asking an interesting question here. And he's basically asking, what do you think they are? But do you have to almost force yourself from going down that road in some respects? It would be very easy it's easy to just choose one. You know,
man, that would be so easy, right? Then we're good to go. Let's go to B-dubs, get some wings. No, unfortunately, it's not that simple, my friends. Whatever we're dealing with, I mean, there are some common thematic elements with ritual magic, but only to an extent. I mean, even today's practitioners, the reason they carve sigils into, cloth and stuff, it's because that sigil is a pictorial autograph, essentially, to another entity to invoke his presence into this dimension. But what do we do about a species that's carving their sigils into us? That again, it's on the precipice of just, it boggles the mind, because there is no way to frame that. It's not a demon. It's something entirely alien to us. And even some of the sigils that I found by virtue of, demoniacs, possession, and UFO cases, it's nothing like I've seen. I mean, I have a good friend of mine there in the UK as well. His name's Dara Fields, and I've sent him at least some pictures of these sigils. And these practitioners don't know what they are. They know that they work. They just don't know what they are because they've never seen this kind of species. And so, do I believe, to answer the question, because you guys know how I ramble, to answer the question, ADHD, that's what I have. So, are they biblical? I tend to believe that. I believe that our ancestors tried to articulate what they were dealing with the best way they could, but even the demonic archetype is merely a mask. I don't know if I told you this story about a good friend of mine who believed they were demonic, and he was in a haunted house, and he's trying to interface with this entity, and he's seeing 666 everywhere. It's the 3 scratches on the body and all that. So they called in a Catholic exorcist. He goes into the most active room in the house. He has a vial of holy water. They place it in the middle of the room and watch that entity switch archetypes. And it siphoned the holy water all the way down to the bottom. And the priest took it, didn't know what to think, and got out. So this switching aspect of it is designed to deceive, to allow us to believe it plays by certain rules. By the time we start to interface with it, something changes. It's something else comes out of the shadows. So I believe that it is biblical, it is primeval, but I'm still myself searching for a correct term as to what they are.
And do you think, Christ, I've no idea. Sorry for saying Christ. Well, I've said it. Do you think there's an end game? Do you think there's an end game? Do you think what is the
survival?
What is the purpose? Survival of what? Survival of the unknown other.
Well, my theory,
it's surviving and deceiving, and it's there regardless of what we think or do. So, what is its end game?
I think, number one, that when people suggest that these are not a threat because they haven't wiped us out, I think they don't really have a good foundational understanding of parasitism and what a symbiotic relationship really is. The purpose of this phenomenon, at least some of these beings, are to keep us alive. And there is this parasitic relationship between us and them. And so it would be in their best interests not to wipe us out. But that's only because we are a source of something for them. And this gets back to the Collins Elite research and Dr. Carla Turner's work herself, where the phenomenon seems to farm people. They start from an early age, specifically women, monitoring their fertility. I had one case study of a car dealership. She's a manager at a car dealership. Heard her on one of my lectures, pulls over on a highway, gets a hold of me. She said that these entities were parasitic from her youth. They had been taking her since she was a child, started to get into puberty. They were monitoring her fertility. She said at 50 years old, she had a hysterectomy. Phenomenon stopped. They actually manifested in her room one last time, were scanning her body. When they realized they could not self-replicate, they left her alone. So the reason that we are still alive, it doesn't mean they're not a threat to us. It means that it's possible that we are, in fact, a farm, in that they are replicating with us. They are evolving with us, and that we are the scaffolding that props their existence up.
Nathaniel, when you say, do you think this is I've mentioned this before, a form of like the body snatchers type scenario? Like, is that what we're dealing with? This, I mean, are they incarnating in humans that are present on Earth, as many people say, or are they literally using the bodies and the vessels and going elsewhere? How does this work?
Well, I do believe that what we're dealing with the Greys essentially are what I've termed synthetic self-replicating systems. It is a system. The consciousness possessing that avatar is really what we're wanting, right? That's what we're after. It's like Lou Elizondo said, and if you will, take him for, I guess, with a grain of salt, if you will. But I know some people don't like him. But my point here is that, he said that some of the bodies we have, that the pilots flying the craft they were in, they did not have the brain matter to design the craft they were flying. Could I suggest that something was piloting the pilot?
Yeah.
All right.
That's what we're dealing with. So to answer your question, yes, it would be the incarnation of, and this is emerging of, an artificial intelligence that merges with consciousness in a way. And we see how it updates and evolves along with the host. But it is parasitic. It's parasitic in all of the literature, incubi, the hybridization program. And in my approach from this, and again, necronetics, is I believe this is a species that is going extinct, and it's trying to preserve itself by self-replicating through us. They'll do that, right? That's the incubus, which is some of my research, my older research, and I don't want to get into. But that's it. Yeah, they're parasitic, and they wear people as what are called social skins. We, again, the church dominated demonology and possession literature to the point that we always saw this through a religious lens. We didn't realize that possession was not just the relocation of life, right? It was the replication of consciousness. And
are we being piloted by them? Are they inhabiting our potentially? And it's probably jumping away from what you've just said, but we talk about the soul, and they're interested in the human soul, maybe harvesting the soul. What if they're living through us? What if their purpose is to live through us? Because all we are flesh, bone, and blood, like most other animals on this planet. But we've got that special attribute that kind of suits them. What if they're just inhabiting us? And I'm talking now, and it's actually them talking.
Yes.
Just, do you know? Because I'm no more than an animal. Well, my wife has said that.
Yeah, right. I was going to say, wait a minute. No, I do believe there's evidence to suggest that. I mean, possession, again, isn't just the commandeering of an avatar. That individual begins to demonstrate memories, pathologies, language preferences that are alien to that individual. That's when you start to really realize that, yes, they are parasitic, but it's almost like they're moving from body to body in order to preserve their own existence. This is why it's so important to have a good foundation of phenomenology, because we would think, according to ufology, that hybridization is just a bunch of grays. That wasn't the case in history. It was disembodied consciousness that would leave its own avatar, possess another, and in that liminal state would be apparitional. And I do believe that's what we're dealing with, guys. I mean, if you look at what some of these bodies are, what they have, they are interdimensional themselves. They can walk through a wall, but it's almost like they can go back to the craft and put on an avatar that looks just like what you just saw. So that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, thank you. Andy H, Chris.
Yeah, Andy H is asking, has Nathaniel interviewed anyone who has seen the devil or what they perceive to be the devil?
Not the devil per se, but the demonic, absolutely. And it's the same old, to be honest with you. It's the usual horns and hooves motif. And then after a little bit of interrogation, you start to realize that wasn't a demon at all, right? This gets back to the archetypes, you know, even when we see, okay, that's a demon, is it a demon according to biblical antiquity, like it wants us to believe? And so what we start doing is we compare and contrast what we're seeing to what's actually historical. You know, the only horns and hoof demon in the Bible was in the book of Revelations, and it was a dragon. But guess what? We're not seeing in the phenomenon. We're not seeing dragons with horns, because it's playing us. It's manifesting as these pop culture archetypes to manipulate us. And so that I have heard stories from specifically demoniacs, but it's interesting when you start to see through the veil, and they're telling you, you know, according to, they're very sincere, obviously, but according to them, it's definitely a demon. But for those of us who know the work, we're looking and say, okay, yes, well, what was it doing? That's the most important question.
Just because it's relevant, last night on Truth Proof, we interviewed a guy who claimed that his experiences began when he was 5 years old, and he thought he'd seen the devil.
Yeah.
And walking to the bathroom at early hours at morning with the light on the landing, and it stepped out from an alcove. He said it were over 6 foot tall. It's a Victorian house, black eyes, little horns on its head, not quite formed like a young goat. And it were orange, an orangey red colour. He says, and it was so muscular, he says, and it put its hand out just in front of my face to touch me. And that, I'm not saying it changed that guy's life, but it put him on the path of looking into the strange and unusual. But it's just apt that question came up, seeing the devil, and this guy thought he had. So if he was telling you that story then, Nathaniel, what would you make of that one? And I know we've not enough detail for you to do a proper analysis of it, but just based on what I've just told you.
You know, this gets back to a conversation Steve Aaron and I had in England, where it does seem to be like some of these events are not just initiations into the field, but it's almost like there's another intelligence out there, again, right, who is trying to trigger something within us, like the black cat in the Matrix. Hey, you need to focus on this. What is that? Right. And then you start getting into the research. Next thing you know, we do conferences and hang out. I think that's really sometimes what it is.
Yeah.
But my thing here is, again, that I'm starting to not believe in the archetypal messages. I mean, even we have an experiencer now here in America who's saying that the lady in white is manifesting and that it's Hathor. And when you start getting into the lore of who she claims to be, it has no biblical history as being angelic. It's literally another archetype. And the problem is, again, without a foundation of phenomenology, people will go away thinking that absolutely is who she's saying she is, not realizing that there's something else going on that doesn't add up, right, again, to the historical narrative of what it claims to be. And that is virtually in every case, when you see that archetype, compare it, contrast it. If it doesn't match, it's lying to you.
Thank you. Nathaniel, have you had any experience or read any of Pierre Sabac's literature? Or I bring it up because the Seraphim, the Reptilians, Carla Turner, Ted Rice, those experiences, common in ufology, more common than you would think, the reptilian thing, common in some biblical texts, just interesting, and a massive taboo throughout the 80s, 90s, and onward, really. Only the last 10 years it's become, quite, palatable. What are your thoughts on that?
I love Pierre Sabac. I think he's brilliant. Obviously, he's brilliant. I love his work, and I'm very interested in the reptilian aspect of it, again, because of Ted Rice's encounter and with some of what I've been witnessing in the field. My thing is this, with respect to the Raphaim, the Nephilim, the whole kind of category of research, there are two arguments, and these arguments kind of define the rest of the research being done. Number one, were these fallen angels? What's fallen about an angel, right? Even the biblical scholars didn't understand that. They kind of took two words, meshed them together. And even at the end of the day, guys, fallen angels not even mentioned in the Bible. So they were almost trying to articulate a phenomenon in their time frame. And the original concept and their original idea essentially was that these weren't reptilians, these weren't some kind of intergalactic species, but it was literally humans that had died, and that they were trying again to preserve their own existence. And so what they did is I guess copulated with women, created a fetus, and then almost astrally projected out of their body, inhabited the fetus. And that's essentially what the Rephaim and Nephilim were. But I do love Pierre Sabac's research, and I consider him very valuable.
He's absolutely brilliant, isn't he? We need him on here. He sent me a brilliant message earlier in the week, and if you're listening, Pierre, thank you very much. He were in last week, as Chris knows, and Lorraine, so we value everything that he's got to contribute to this. Is it a subject? It's not, is it? But yeah, I don't know what. Yeah,
I think it needs as many minds on this, and you know, from as many different angles and backgrounds and cultures as we can get.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you could argue that the separation of cultures and I guess the genocide of certain cultures is part of. Do you think that's obviously part of hiding some of this?
Absolutely.
Getting rid of the footprints. What do you call them? The bloody footprints in the snow? Do you call them?
Yeah. I believe so, and I believe that's how it's hidden from us throughout history. I mean, how can you be present with us but absent from us at the same time? The archetypes present. And truthfully, that may be the only thing we interface with in the research. Even that itself might not even be what we're truly dealing with. But that's where I'm at, guys. I think that it is parasitic and symbiotic, and I think that's why they're not going to wipe us all out. There is a relationship between us and them.
Do you know, did you touch on the White Lady earlier? Did you say somebody said they were seeing the White Lady?
Yes.
Do you think that these things are thrown out as a kind of contagion, like hoping that, not hoping, yes, because hoping is the wrong word, because I think they already know the end game before as they actually throw the hook out. They actually know what's going to happen. I think that there's a far more intelligence than me saying hoping. But do you think that they're throwing all these little tidbits out for people to latch on to just, is it all a deception, all a game of deception to keep us away from the real truth of it all?
At least with the darker aspects of it, yes. I mean, again, when people say I think it's all of it, or when they ask me if it's all a deception, and I say that, they're gonna be like, well, there's no good in it, so I don't want to say that. But with the negative, it is deception. It's profound deception. I mean, I'm collecting evidence now in case studies where the phenomenon is involuntarily initiating people in abductions. They don't even know what's going on. They're going literally, like I have a compendium somebody sent me of lamb magic, some of which Crowley was working with. And there are hundreds of practitioners throughout the entire world who are encountering this figure lamb. And they're initiating by virtue, and this is interesting, at least in my perspective, initiating by virtue of succubus encounters. Where, yes.
No, go on. No, I'm going to say, give us an example if you've got one that springs to mind.
So a succubus throughout history was an entity that appears to men in the image of a woman. So usually it's a former lover, deceased wife, or something in that nature. Well, these succubus cases actually, I guess some of them could be and are initiatory rites in lamb magic. Like one of these practitioners was talking about staring into the eyes of lamb. I know this is very dark, but it's fascinating stuff, and we have to talk about it, unfortunately. But he's staring into the eyes of this creature. And as he's staring into his eyes, he leaves his body and he merges with a ball of light hovering above his house. So and then after that, the succubus visits him, they copulate, and he was told by Lamb that this is an initiatory experience. This is alarming to me because, again, we already have a foundation in phenomenology of Ouija boards being used to contact the extraterrestrials. Now we're seeing Lamb initiating practitioners all around the world. Now, to take that a step further and kind of bring it home, is Matthew Roberts. Again, it wasn't just that a voice came to him and said, listen, this is what I want you to read. He was visited by a succubus. They copulated. And then after the initiation was told, this is an initiation rite. You are ascending. So I'm very concerned about where this field of ufology is going, because I think it's getting darker and darker by the day. And the only people who would know that, right, are the people who have a thumb on the pulse of phenomenology, like we do.
Right. Thank you.
You know,
that leads us nicely into Andy's question. Actually, he's saying if ET is interdimensional, why are Earth forces still allegedly chasing craft, which surely ID beings and energies would not need? Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a good question.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So Richard Banderick, who was on an interview recently, he is a former Skunkworks, former Lockheed Martin. He's now a CEO of his own aerospace company. He said that 40 years ago they were in the desert, his company was, and that they were picking up nanotechnologies, metamaterials off the ground. They were self-assembling, and so they would kind of latch onto each other. And he said at first blush, it looks like technology, right? It looks like it's something that's alien or extraterrestrial. He said, and after holding it in his hand for less than a minute, it dissolved into dirt and dust. So
Wow.
can I suggest, because I want to make this point and I'll get back to the question here in a second. Can I suggest the phenomenon is doing exactly what it's done throughout history? It's seeding us with technology that's designed for one practitioner. It's designed, and that's what they're learning, right? Oh, okay, like they gave Chris Bledsoe a metamaterial, and they're like, okay, hold this in your hand. And they watched him, and our government looked at him, and specifically Tim Taylor said, why you? And so this gets back to, you know, early necronetics in antiquity, where the primordial man, you probably heard me say this, stoking the embers of a dying fire, a download enters his mind, go out and get a piece of metal. Where'd the metal come from, right? Fast forward 2025, we're starting to realize it, seeding us with technology that is designed to not just be conjured by the practitioner, but designed to conjure the practitioner themselves. And so the primordial man, of course he would. I'm going to go get a piece of metal. Then the phenomenon instructed him, carve my name into that metal and place that into a cadaver. And now the phenomenon incarnates by virtue of technology. This is why I'm so disturbed by artificial intelligence and what it could possibly be. Again, a reference to John Keel's Trojan horse.
Where do you think its end game will be then? What do you think its ultimate goal is?
It would be the ultimate parasite. I mean, it would almost be like we're creating bodies for it to inhabit. You know, take this into consideration. I had a case years ago, as an incubus case, and I'm at the door of this house. I'm looking to my left. There's a family in there, the husband and the wife. They're watching TV, eating dinner. They can see me. Okay. I'm knocking on the door in the cold of December. Nobody's listening. Nobody's answering. I'm waving my hands at them. They don't see me at all. I finally call them. He answers the phone. Are you here, Nathaniel? Yes. We're in the we're in the house. We're having a conversation. He's like, you know, speaking about technology, he said, I don't understand what's going on. I said, why? He said, because the entity that's been haunting my wife is now hunting him. What do you mean? He said that he was cooking dinner and his cell phone's on the kitchen table. He said, someone calls his cell phone and answers it, swipes the Apple phone open, pushes the speakerphone button, and begins to communicate through him, called him by name. Come over here and talk to me. Wow. So whatever we're dealing with has the ability not just to hack biology, right, but could possibly hijack all of artificial intelligence. Now, let me take this a step further. What I'm seeing now in the field is people using artificial intelligence to divine divinity. This is what AI says an angel looks like. How is that any different than the phenomenon controlling the narrative?
It can steer us now then, potentially.
Yes, yes, it could self-confirm, right? Like, oh, I know I abducted you last night, did some pretty awful things, but AI now says, hey, it was done to you because it was done for you. All is well. Right?
Cheers.
So if it can if AI can define divinity, and if we believe in their definition of divinity, we have a problem. And that's, I think, where we're sitting, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Have you read anything in your studies about? I mean, look, Atlantis is for many a mythical, fabled city, but I'm certain from what I've read that something or somewhere like it definitely existed. And somewhere in that literature, I'm sure I've come across some type of archontic, artificial, interdimensional force that infiltrated that civilization, which many believe was a worldwide civilization, not just one place on Earth. They believe it was a worldwide civilization, and that led to it. The introduction of this tech led to its downfall. Have you read anything like that?
I have a little bit, and I think it stands to reason. It's true. It appears, at least, that's the model of the phenomenon. I mean, even if you get into archons and Gnosticism, this is fascinating too, because it kind of complements your question. They believe that just like these entities will masquerade as loved ones and guides, that they were also kind of copying reality itself and creating an artificial world to inhabit. And so even if you get back to Richard Banderich's research, he said the metamaterials they had resembled the environment they were in. So literally hiding in plain sight. And so I do believe that whatever we're dealing with is parasitic, but is almost like an artificial intelligence and consciousness merged somewhere in history. And that may very well be, I guess, could have caused the downfall, right, in Atlantis.
Tanya's saying something interesting. Crowley obviously was way ahead of his time, but portals have been here for many, many years. Right. Do you agree?
I do. And they're in peculiar places and in peculiar people. I think that we can possibly be mortal portals. I mean, the number one question, this is crazy, but it's true. The number one question that we're getting from Ouija boards is, can you let me in? Let me in. And so this, again, the idea of incarnating through us, it's very true, and it's documented throughout history. But these portals, again, it's almost like they're seeding us with the desires to create the portals. And then when we obey them, we create the portal, then they manifest through. And so it's almost like they've built a door, then gave us a key to open it, and then just walked in. It's troubling. Is this making sense, by the way, at all? I don't want to ramble too much. You guys know me.
Absolutely.
You're not rambling at all, really. I mean, the point is you're making everybody think, and that's no bad thing.
I hope so. I hope I'm not getting killed in the comments.
Myself included. So are we dealing with a phenomenon or a phenomena? Is it a single or are there many? Because I'm not saying all we're hearing from you, because a lot of what I talk about is dark. There's not a good, but where's the light? Have we got some good aspects to this?
So Dr. Carla Turner, before she passed, she was having a really, really, really rough time. I mean, that goes without saying with her research, but she appealed to a higher power. And she was at her wit's end. I can't take it anymore, right? They were haunting and abducting her kids, just crazy stuff. And so she appealed to a higher power, and that higher power plucked her clean out of a dream. She's in bed. Boom. You're out of a dream. She said it was weird because I was out of my body, but I still had my body. And she said she was in a chair. She remembered taking her hands and touching the metallic chair. And in front of her was like a panel of judges, beings that she could barely see, but she knew they were present. And this gets back to self-replication and copying reality. They kept playing a scene in the Bible, right? I think it's Abraham and Jacob, I believe. I may have murdered that. But this is where is Jacob and Esau, where Esau, I believe, comes in wearing Jacob's mantle and steals the blessing. And at that point, they kept replaying it. And they would ask her, Dr. Turner, do you see what we're giving you and what we're showing you? And she would try to, I'm seeing this. And they're like, no, that's not what we want you to see. They'd press play again. So finally, she got fed up. What are you wanting me to know? And they said, well, what we're wanting you to know is that there is a species in your world that is trying to take over the whole planet. And it's doing so by blending in reality. It looks like, and again, we're seeing this in ufology, incubi encounters. I mean, I just went to the Air Force Museum the other day here in Dayton, Ohio, Wright Pat Air Force Museum. There are still aircraft that have rivets in them. But now we're seeing UAP that allegedly could travel through space with rivets in them. Literally, again, the phenomenon incarnating as a ship or a plane, and yet we know it can't do what it's doing. And so again, there is this desire for the phenomenon to blend into our reality. And I think that's troubling in many ways, but it's quite possible that we're looking at the phenomenon all the time.
Yeah.
And it's looking back at us, but it's hiding in plain sight. And I'll stop my little ramble with this. Oftentimes, my friends, we're blinded by our own vision.
Yeah, which again ties into what Lee Roscoe is asking here about
Yep.
this cycle that we've been on for a period of time, and he's saying, do you think they are deliberately changing the narrative to put us back on the wheel, so to speak?
Yes, same phenomenon, same intelligence. It wants all of the altars, it wants all the sacrifices, all of the ritual magic. It wants to be lamb without Crowley, but it wants to be lamb with UAP witnesses, right? And I think that deserves more attention because people just kind of skip over that. But I think they skip over it because they just simply don't know. It's not that they're rejecting it whole cloth. It's just they don't have, again, a background in this research to say, listen, why is it that we have hybridization through demonology and ufology, right? It seems to be the same phenomenon. But to his question, yes, it's again, people need to write this down if you can. The new mask is constructed with remnants of the older masks. All of the same details. It's just now it's the new archetype. It's the new program that supersedes all others.
Okay. Just before we move on to a question, or whether Chris has got a question, obviously within your research, you're taking case studies, aren't you? Other, from all over the world, I assume, not just in the United States. So where can people contact you?
I'm just on Instagram now. I hang out there. I'm not on Facebook anymore. I've kind of simplified my life. But if you guys are wanting to hear more of my research, you can go to my YouTube channel. I have a playlist of all of my interviews on YouTube. I think I'm up to 150, and you can kind of switch the menu there to figure out. Look at all my interviews in the past and see how my research has evolved into 2025.
Yeah.
So you said, sorry, Paul. Go on.
No, go on. No, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you. I know last time we met when you were over in the UK, and I think actually last time we spoke online, you were talking about this book and another book, because you already have written a book, yep. the Skin That Crawls. But you said you were going to be working on a new book. Are you still working on that at the moment?
Yes. Yeah, I was writing yesterday, and I'm to the point now where I'm adding Professor Esther Amori's research with a guy named T. Whitten Davies, and I'm writing about the Witch of Endor. She was, this is fascinating. So at least I love it. I love the research. But she was called a Ma'ala'uv, which was a mistress of the image of the dead. And so I think that the phenomenon has created at least another hybridization program. And that's a whole other show. And I don't want to go down that list because I'll really ramble.
And unless Kristen wants to add to that, dear Chris?
No.
You talked about looking into the eyes earlier, yes, didn't you? And almost we've all looked into people's eyes, and we've all seen pictures, and you can see reflection back. It's like a mirror. So they talk about the eyes being the windows of your soul and things like that. So how important do you think mirrors are and eyes within all of this?
They are profoundly present in these case studies. Even in the incubi literature, it's the staring into the eyes of the entities that almost induces the experiencer into hypnosis. It's the only way I can articulate it. And the deeper they look into the eyes, the more power the phenomenon has over them, to where they're not just experiencing the entity, they're being experienced by the entity. Now the phenomenon is not manifesting to them, it's manifesting through them. And to the point where the experiencer says, okay, I don't know why. First of all, I know it's not my husband. Right. But something is telling me to believe it is. And that's that commandeering of consciousness with the eyes. I had a case study in Kentucky, about an hour and a half from here, and the husband was freaking out. Okay. He said his wife was being haunted by this entity, and it would hover over her at nighttime, directly over top of her, eyes to eyes. And he said that he got home from work the other day, and he said that he's looking for his wife, and she was in paralyzed in the bed. The only thing she could say is, honey, he's hovering over me right now. And so this eye-to-eye connection is, again, it's interreligious and cross-cultural. It's just another pathology, right, that unites all of the phenomena, regardless of the archetypes. But yeah, so that's essentially what it is. And again, that does speak to something like an artificial intelligence,
Yeah,
where
thank you.
it's commandeering you and thinking for you at the same time.
One of the questions I've always had about this, Nathaniel, because I've come from obviously originally from ufology and got into this phenomenology only just recently.
Yeah.
And it's relevant to what Dave's asking here, and it's the good and evil question. That, I mean, that's obviously in your past line of work. That must come up over and over. Yeah. Where are you with that at the minute?
It's been a struggle. It really has. I think that there is evidence to suggest that there is something else out there that's fighting on our behalf. The problem is, like, what rules does it play by, right? I mean, are we dealing with an hierarchy of beings? I mean, what I've seen just recently is that even when people call on the name of Jesus or call on the name of a deity, even with Ted Rice, remember that case study? We all know it, right? The grandmother told the entity, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. You're going to go right to hell where you belong. And the entity just completely bypassed it, made fun of her, told her there's no hell, no God, and ended up doing really bad things. So this narrative, and again, that's kind of been hoisted upon me by many in the field where, okay, just say the name of a deity, right? Or your favorite patron saint. Next thing you know, the phenomenon is going to leave you alone. That's not universal. And if it was, right, we would have no issues here. We probably wouldn't even have the conversation. It would be over, right? Snap your fingers, take 2 scriptures, call me in the morning. But it's not how it works, unfortunately. And I've had other researchers come to me here lately saying that in some of their cases, it's almost like it's the most devout, most sacred people that are the most targeted by the phenomenon. And even to the point, guys, where when the person, like with Dr. Clark Turner, one of her cases where Jesus manifested, but it wasn't Jesus of antiquity, right? It's something else. It's the false divine. And so I think that's where we are right now, even to like the Vatican coming out, having new guidelines for apparitions, because they're starting to see what we are seeing in the field. And that is people are being abducted by angels that are probing them. They're doing god-awful things to them, but they're doing it under the guise of deity. So I think that we have to test the spirits, and I think that's where the Vatican is right now, trying to build a modality for us to do so.
So do you think there's good coming out of the Vatican then?
I don't know. I tend to lean more towards Malachi and Martin's framework with the Vatican. You know, that there are some Jesuits that are performing ritual magic.
So without going into personalities or being personal towards anything, then do you get harassed or challenged by people of religion who are absolutely fixed in a box that they're never going to jump out of, and they see you as a threat? Because
I get it from everybody, you know, or from most, because they don't know where to place me in my research. I'm kind of an outlier, and I don't do that intentionally, and I don't say that as, you know, as a braggart. It's an uncomfortable position to be in. You know, the Christians and everybody that, you know, they say, okay, you know, I'm a pagan, and the pagans say I'm a Christian, and the occultists say I'm a demonologist, and the demonologists say I'm an occultist. Really, all I'm doing, okay, is I'm connecting as many dots as I possibly can, and hopefully approaching it from an objective stance, not be held into some ritual dogmatic, you know, modality. That's not what I want to do. And thankfully, it's because of that non-dogmatic data approach that I've been able to kind of flesh some ideas out.
Yeah, the breath of fresh air, Nathaniel.
Thank you.
Debbie Shaw's asking, what does Nathaniel think about the raw material channeled by Carla Ruckert is?
I'm just going to shoot from the hip here. I'm very cautious about channel material. I've seen it too many times where they'll give you enough information, and this has been corroborated by the evidence, the Philip experiment, right? All of that skull experiment. They'll give you enough evidence of truth, right? They'll give you, okay, yeah, A, B, and C, that's true. And all of a sudden it will want you to do something, or it will slide some kind of lie into it, and then everybody else is impressed. So I'm very cautious of channeled material. Even like with the Collins Elite research, they went to a witch called Symbiotic, and she moved from the UK to Los Angeles, and they asked her to channel the entities that Crowley was in contact with. And as she was channeling it, something commandeered her consciousness, unlike anything else before in her life. They began to converse with these entities. Are you extraterrestrial? And the entity laughed at them, mocked them, and said, "You idiots, don't you know this is just our newest deception?"
Really?
Archetypes. And I think, again, even the channeled entities are archetypes too.
So by sliding the lie, as you say, is that just to discredit the individual or the group of individuals?
I think so. And there seems to be some kind of misunderstanding with their abilities. This is another thing that Dr. Carla Turner kind of dealt with. She said that, okay, it's almost like they know a little bit of information, right? They'll give you what they think you want, and then by the time they come back and say, "Listen, can you give me more info?" They'll give you something that makes no sense at all. And it even goes a step further. Even with John Dee and Edward Kelly, it wasn't just the Enochian language, right? That's the hook. That's the hook. Once they started interfacing with this entity that claimed to be angelic, it wanted them to do something for it. And ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly where our government is right now.
So if somebody wanted to communicate, to contact the unknown other, what would your advice be?
Well, here's the thing. It's almost like a 50-50 shot. I mean, if it doesn't like you, you could have serious problems. And I'm not talking about, okay, I had a bad day. I knew a lady that tripped over an entity at a jail. It was actually a prison. And she didn't know it existed, didn't know it was there. When she got home, the next 2 years of her life went to hell in a handpot, I guess, or whatever it's called. You know, it's crazy. I mean, hell in a handbag, I think it was what it was. Right. Anyways, yeah, absolutely. She lost her job. She got a divorce. She was diagnosed with some kind of disease that was fatal in the end. Her rabbit died. She filed for bankruptcy. I mean, even if you look at Robert Bigelow, he stated in no uncertain terms that he's never going to step foot on the Skinwalker Ranch again. And they asked him why. They said because afterwards, the hitchhiker effect ruined their lives. I mean, I'm talking about people like death involved and just losing their minds. So I personally, unless it's, again, there are a few of us that do this for research purposes, but to entertain them, to play their game, very dangerous.
So, Nathaniel, there are a number of researchers, we won't mention the names for obvious reasons, that are take a very love and light approach to this.
Yeah.
Going off what you've just said and everything you've just talked about and everything you have ever talked about, that is very, I think, and I've always felt, because I've done a lot of stuff with abduction stuff with a lot of witnesses and experiences, that is terrifying, really, when they're introducing these things to the kids. I mean, that is frightening, really.
Yeah, giving them offerings, building altars for them. And that's all well and good until something happens it doesn't like, and then now it's knocking on your door. And that's happened not just with researchers and experiencers, but again, initiates who are early in their careers hoping, I want to contact the other. They go through a certain series of events. Next thing you know, something is unleashed in their life, and they cannot put that genie back in the bottle. It transcends all languages. It transcends all knowledge. It knows when people die. It knows what clothes they died in. And so that's why I say it's exceedingly dangerous. And to the people that say, okay, it's all love and light, I don't think it is. And I think, again, they're not rooted in phenomenology, because the data doesn't lie. And there are plenty of case studies to say that it's not all love and light.
100% agree.
Here's Andy asking, does Nathaniel think we can create our own dimensions in the same concept of CE5?
Creating our own dimensions, I do not believe so. And again, I'm a proponent of the following theory, that we're not conjuring them, they're conjuring us. You know, one of the aspects of the Collins Elite research was that the practitioners in our government were allowed to believe they were in control. They were given the illusion of control. That's the love and light aspect, where they're interfacing with the phenomenon and they're thinking, this was my idea, right? I'm the one that's doing this. It's all me. And it's not. The phenomenon, again, is manifesting through that person and to them at the self-same time. And so it's problematic for us because, you know, there are people, okay, that is, it's us. It's not. It's, again, the primordial man stoking the dying embers of a fire, and a download comes. Go out and do something.
I just want to hijack one of Lorraine's questions, which I know she'll put up, but it's from Lee. Chris, I was subscribed, but tonight I noticed I am unsubscribed. So that's to everybody in chat, please, people. There's well over 100 people in now. Just check if you've subscribed. If you haven't, please subscribe. And if you've found yourself unsubscribed, do it again. I don't know why that would be.
Yeah, I've heard that about a few
we get
channels.
It on. Yeah, we're getting it as well on Truth Proof. But you know, let's try. And
we're not saying it's something sinister. It could be some bot thing. YouTube's just run by AI anyway these days. So
sorry about that, Lorraine, because she's doing a brilliant job with questions. And
I thought you was actually I was gonna ask Lorraine. Lorraine, could you put Martin Abbas's question, because that's quite relevant to what Nathaniel was talking about then.
We've put brilliant. Thanks, Lorraine. Nathaniel, have you ever experienced exorcism? That's
it
not
wasn't that one, but don't worry.
But it doesn't matter. We're going to deal with this one. Nathaniel, have you ever experienced exorcism or seen one? If so, what happened? Love your work, Martin.
Thank you, Martin.
Great guy.
Thank you, buddy.
Thank you, Lorraine.
Yes, good question. So when I did perform exorcisms, it was very few times, and I would perform it through the Lurianic tradition, where it would be dislodging the entity within by allowing the individual to have more power, more autonomy. And that happened to be the result of an unaliving. And so this entity was within the family. And so it's a whole other story. But yeah, so I have witnessed exorcisms, but it wasn't through the Catholic rite. It was in the church body, where people they would come from other countries and perform them. You know, it's fascinating stuff. We used to have a guy named Jonathan Suber. He was from Africa. He's a white guy. It's funny. He's a white guy that grew up in the States, like about 15, 16, went to Africa, and then had the rest of his life there. So he would come to the States and do exorcisms. But again, it wasn't through holy water. He would just literally lay hands on them, talk to the entity, and they would leave. Really, it was crazy stuff, but I loved watching it.
So Lorraine's just put that question up. Thank you, Lorraine. From Martin Abbas again, but it were relevant. Chris were on the ball with that. Absolutely relevant, Chris, weren't it? Ask Nathaniel about the offerings in Dane's Dyke, because me and Chris have spoke about these quite a bit. There's some strange. It's not damage to trees. There's some strange things going on with the trees, which we can get to kind of off air at some point in next week or so, if you want, Nathaniel. But around this area, and it's within about a 30-foot radius, because I've been with a surveyor's tape and measured it, there's a series of offerings. And there's a bell, which is about, 15, 16-inch deep, 12-inch across. There's an Adonis, you know, the sort of model of an Adonis. There's a mermaid. There's lots of bird skulls, ravens, rooks, even a cormorant, and other things. Linny's seen them. If he's in chat, he'll know what I'm talking about. But they're all, I mean, imagine the bell when I tell you that they're all 3D printed. And so that they're huge, and the you know, to 3D print a bell that's 15 or 16-inch by 12-inch is quite something. It's not done on a some kind of crafter's machine, is it? But they're left in the dike around this strange area where we've got these trees that I don't know how they broke off 15 to 20 foot up and bent over, and it's almost as though they've been steamed over, and all the sinews of the timber of the wood is showing. It's really strange. There's 25 of these trees in a circle around these offerings. I don't get it. So first of all, I suppose we're asking you, what do you think the offerings are? I know that's where Chris will go in with it, so apologies for my rambling.
It seems that they were there for the purpose of incarnation, especially if you have some of the foliage missing or burnt. I had a case this is fascinating. I had a case one time almost like that where a family was abducted from a gas station. And they didn't understand why. They're like, okay, what's going on? Well, they went back to Google Maps, Google MapQuest, whatever it's called, and looked back through history. And that used to be an area where cult rituals were performed.
Okay.
And the phenomenon went there more than anywhere else. So I think that may be what's going on.
So more to be more specific, and I suppose I'm putting you on the spot because you might not have a knowledge of it. Why a bell? Any thoughts?
It's very interesting. Throughout, especially specifically in Jewish exorcisms, the priests would have bells in order to drive away unwanted spirits. So that may very well be it, right? If you conjure something that you did not expect or did not intend, it may have been a way to get rid of them and banish them. That's about the only reference I have with bells.
Nathaniel, thank you. No, it's absolutely great. We put you on spot with that one, didn't we? But
it's okay.
I know I were reading it when Chris were reading it, so I could see Chris's cogs working. So I knew we wanted to offer that one up because it's interesting. Ultimately, though, there must be something there with the significance of that portion of land, don't you think?
Yes. And that gets into Barry Fitzgerald's work, which is equally as fascinating, where the phenomenon incarnates in geographical locations of its choosing, and it always does. It's not like, okay, it moves over. No, it's always present. Even with Tim Taylor going out in the middle of the desert performing his rituals underneath the cosmology of stars, it's always there. It's fascinating. You can actually go there. It's incarnate through portals, and you can access it at any point. And so, again, that's another interconnectivity that suggests this is not modern. It's ancient. It's always been in the desert, right?
Thank you.
Always has.
Yeah, Brett's asking in your research, Nathaniel, with possession, has anyone ever mentioned any of the possessed people? Have they mentioned ETs or other dimensions, anything like that?
No, not at all. It's usually the entity and the belief system or propaganda of that entity. But I haven't experienced that.
And you believe that these entities back in time introduced the religion, 100%. If you like, or worship in order to accomplish its goal, essentially.
Yes, and that kind of pushes the conversation in a really unique direction, because I can't relate to that, right? I cannot relate to demanding that another species builds an altar for me or gives me a ritual sacrifice. It just doesn't make any sense, and it's reminiscent in my mind of Nosferatu. If you guys have not watched it yet, you have to. It's an incredible movie. But in that movie, Nosferatu looks at a man. The man looks at Nosferatu. He kept calling Nosferatu, the vampire, he kept calling him Mr., Sir, Master. And Nosferatu cut him off and said, "You will address me as Lord because my bloodline demands it." That, in my mind, that's more along the lines of what we're dealing with, where the species we're encountering at least believes it's way more evolved than we are and demands servantship and worship.
We're always subservient to it, always.
Yeah, subservient, absolutely. And they want us to know that. I mean, even with the Philip experiment, it wasn't just that they created an archetype. The phenomenon created the archetype itself and gave them directions to conjure it. And the phenomenon manifested, right? I'm Philip. And so the first thing he started doing was he talked to a woman in there. "Hey, listen, I know your car broke down on the way to work today." Demonstrating, right, authority. I know something I should not know. And this gets back to some of the experiences like with Chris Bledsoe and some of the others, and I have no disrespect to any of them. I'm concerned personally, because what's starting to happen is that we're seeing through the messages to the point the phenomenon has to perform miracles to convince us. I shouldn't know, right? I shouldn't know that you wrecked your car or it broke down, but I do. And if you believe that, I want you to do something for me. And that is essentially where that symbiotic and in turns parasitic relationship begins, is through that manifestation of knowledge that they should not have access to. That's where it starts.
So going back through time, decades, 40, 50, 60 years, cults have sprang up who've predicted the end of the world, predicted the arrival of the aliens or beings of unknown origin. And then suddenly it's all gone wrong. They've been tricked. Is that what's happening?
Yes,
Or are they?
yes.
Or are some of them
Shapeshifting.
deluded? Absolutely deluded. But I guess what I'm saying is, some of them have actually been in contact with something else. So
Yeah.
they're not that. They're not actually. I don't know. They've been tricked in order to steer mankind and make everyone believe that it's all a load of rubbish.
Yes, and as always, the carrot in front of the horse is the truth, right? I'm going to give you the prophecy. And you're going to be really special, right? They're grooming the experiencer. People are going to know you all around the world. They're going to love you. You're going to have content and everything. And then they kind of hang their careers on that. Next thing you know, they give a prophecy that doesn't come true. And now the rug's pulled out from underneath them.
Wrecked. Yeah.
Right. And there has to be some sort of pathology present there. It can't, at least from my perspective, it can't simply be that they're lying. It's almost like they're wanting something from that individual. And that individual's not understanding that power dynamic where at some point, just like the Collins Elite said, yes, you're going to worship them. They'll give you a partially manifested metamaterial. It'll be apparitional. You'll try to grab it, but your hand will go through it. But what has it done? It's like I said at the Awakening last year, where by the time these people go out into the desert and spend 2 hours of their own time, spend hundreds of dollars of their own money, by that time, they're not the ones conjuring, they're the ones being conjured. And so again, with us researchers, at least I know myself, I always looked at this and I said, it doesn't make any sense because there's not much happening in the actual conjuring. Well, that's not where the manifestation took place. The manifestation took place a long time ago when they started to obey the voice.
Fabulous. Thank you.
It's making sense, guys. Hopefully I'm not getting killed on the comments, guys. I
No,
know.
I don't
No,
think you are.
absolutely not, Matt.
No, not absolutely. We'll talk about you afterwards, Nathaniel. Don't worry.
Oh, thank you. Okay. No, honestly, I'm not really feeling good, and so I was worried about that. So I'm glad it's going well.
Absolutely. Always love speaking with you.
Yeah, totally. Martin's asking, as a human's part of the life cycle. Essentially, I think what he's saying is, if we all come from this source, if you like, is this parasitic phenomenon part of that as well, part of the experience of learning of this cycle of life?
I think it is. And obviously we're learning from it, but I don't know if that's really its intention or if that's just a byproduct of trauma. Again, this gets back to the propaganda peddled by many entities when they do bad things to good people. I'm doing this to you because I'm doing it for you. And that's another motif in the love and light narrative where it's like, well, you agreed to this before you were born. That's very interesting because I don't know that. How do you know that? If I don't even know that, how do you know that? And so we kind of get into this Jeffrey Dahmer-esque explanation of trauma where, well, I'm doing this to trigger evolution within you as a species. It's like, no, you're not. Because literally, we know probably as little today as we did yesterday. The only thing that's different, right? The only thing that's different is now we have scars on our body and we're being haunted by near-death experiences.
They're manufacturing the ideas. Yeah, absolutely.
And manufacturing consent, my friend.
You're talking about scars on your body, unless Chris wants to just...
No, I was going to just say that, Paul. Are you going to talk about what happened to you?
Well, 1997 is when late 1997 is when it stopped for me. And I saw them... I saw them in the night, and when I woke in the morning, and it's apt that we've got Martin Abbas in the question there because he's looked at all my medical case notes, and Dr. Martin Abbas, and it don't conclude that I'm not crazy, by the way. Let's face it, when you're talking about this subject, there'll be people there rolling their eyes, but I saw them, and the next morning when I woke up, I'd got no memory of anything happening at all, apart from just feeling tired, and I sat on the edge of bed. I was naked. It was daytime, but I suppose what doesn't being naked mean? But that's it. My wife rolled over in bed. She says, "I don't believe it, Paul. You've got 3 holes in your back," and something triggered. Something started to sort of stir in my mind. And as she got talking to me more, I saw the lights in the bedroom. I saw the outline of the figures. I got the words from them that it were a bed spring of all things. You'd think I'd create something more exotic than a bed spring that were turning in my back. Don't worry. The pain were excruciating. but they were giving me messages and everything. And yeah, the scars, they're still there. And I can't prove any of this to anybody. And I've sort of wandered off in my own rant here, Chris, Nathaniel, but it's still as confusing today for me as it was back then. But I know what I saw. And at 62-year-old, I've done with pretending it didn't happen just to please other people who roll their eyes and think you're nuts, because it did happen and I did see them. But I don't know where we're going with that one, Chris.
No, the reason I brought it up, I thought you was going to talk about the amulets and the carving into. I wonder.
Oh, I can go. Yes.
Apologies. Yes. Sorry. Yeah.
I wonder whether that question. Actually, I don't want to terrify you with it.
No, well. Are we talking about when we got the property? And when I don't know what your home's like, Nathaniel, or anybody's, but obviously there's floorboards upstairs you'd take up, and there'd be wiring where a wire would drop through to the room below. Well, when we were removing these floorboards and rewiring the house, there were amulets, St. Christopher's, pages of the Bible, under various things, the Lord's Prayer. There were a tiny little, it weren't gold, but it were gold-coloured necklace. And the letters were so small, but it were the entire Lord's Prayer. That were under one on landing where there were a wire going down for a light. All the way around the landings, there were little, Sarah, any girls who are in chat will back me up on this. There were little bronze or brass. They were pinned to the wall with three pins, or brass or copper pins, all the way around, gargoyles. And this house had been used by people. I don't even think they were spiritualists. There was darker things going off. When we cleared all the wallpaper off the top bedroom, there were pentagrams and satanic symbolism on the walls and all sorts of things. Is that what you were going to, Chris?
Well, I just wondered about the actual carving into the skin thing, just because I know Nathaniel's looked into that, and is there a relevance here? There may well not be, but I'm just curious.
Yeah. So before Nathaniel answers that, I need to apologise then for going into two completely.
Not everybody in the chat will know that story, so it's good that you've explained it. And I don't know whether Nathaniel has heard all that either. So yeah.
I think this may be the first time. It's reminiscent of some case studies from Dr. Ian Stevenson's research, which kind of explodes us into a whole nother field of research here. It's fascinating. But in regards to the soul and skin relationship, what we're seeing now in the phenomenon is that people that go out of body and are triggered into bilocation by the phenomenon, that they're doing something to the soul. And then when they're returned into their body, whatever is carved into the consciousness merges with the avatar and bleeds through the skin. I mentioned earlier about the remote viewer. Well, I also had a case study of a malevolent haunting. It was with a mother and her daughter, and they had that same manifestation where the entity was growling, it was carving things in the walls, yelling at them, talking to them at nighttime, and they both felt a burning sensation within. And they said as they're looking down at their arms, and from underneath the skin to the surface were scratches. Now, what's fascinating about this is it gets into Dr. Ian Stevenson's research, like I mentioned, where he was dealing with people who claimed to have past lives. And he had a series of cases where if their body, let's say if their last body had been mortally wounded in the neck, the death wound of the old body would become the birthmark of the new. And so the consciousness carried the scarification into the new avatar. This is also corroborated by Betty Lucas' case study, where this is, again, the grooming parasitic relationship, where it appears that she had constitution to her consciousness. It wasn't just, energy or being. There was a subtle nature to her consciousness, and they were teaching her how to fly the craft out of body. And then when she got back into her body, only then, when the apparition merged with the avatar, did she have subdermal scarifications move from the surface from underneath the surface to the skin. So there's a relationship between the soul and the skin. And dare I suggest, ladies and gentlemen, that we did not know that in times past, but that may very well be what is being targeted. Not just in ufology being malevolent hauntings, where we're encountering entities. And again, it follows the same logic of them playing by rules that we're ignorant of. And those rules have to do with the soul and consciousness.
Where does stigmata fit into this?
I think, yeah, well, I think this goes back to, Barry Fitzgerald's research too, where the phenomenon was manipulating religious manifestations. Where at first we thought that it was in the hands, right? I got it in the hands, and we found out it was in the wrists, right? And but the Vatican said that because that's where the phenomenon was manifesting.
But could that not be the power of our minds that can create these?
Yeah, okay, I see where it very well may be. I'm appealing to that. I'm sympathetic with that. I'm just
thinking, Nathaniel, sorry for cutting across. Like you said, first of all, it was the hands. Then they realized that the hands couldn't support the weight, and it would have.
There we go.
That sounds to sound graphic, but it would have torn the body would have torn through. So it was the wrists, and suddenly people started having the wounds in the wrists.
There we go, my friend. It's another symbiotic mimicry. I think that's what it is, right? It's okay. What do you think it is, and then that's what it will be. It's again the archetypal presence of being present with us but absent from. It's not the real phenomenon. If it has to evolve, right? That's not the proto-intelligence. That's the archetype that's evolving according to our awareness of it, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Nathaniel, I wanted to ask you, because all this is relevant, because I think, I mean, no, I was like that a bit like this when I came across Pierce Bach's work, when I came across your work, but also when I came across the research Jerry Marzinski is doing with those voices. Yeah. Can you tell the audience a little bit about what Jerry's doing there?
Yes, I love Jerry's research. I had about 2 years ago, I had a conference call with him and Michelle DeVries, and we were talking about his cases. So his research is into mental illness, mental health, and he worked at various hospitals. And some of the parasitic entities that he encountered were they were fascinating, but very troubling. I mean, he told me a story about how he was in the ER, and they had called him to talk to this individual that was in there just thrashing his arms about, and they believed he was possessed. And but this individual didn't know who Jerry Marzinski was at the time. But Jerry walks by his hospital room, and the entity snaps to attention. Jerry, don't come near me. Don't come near me. And so more than anything else, his work kind of corresponds with my own in terms of we're not the conjurers, we're being conjured in the following way. He said that he had a case of an addict who was trying to get clean. He would just kind of go through the same process where he would get clean, and then he would get onto drugs, and he would hear voices, and he would go to the hospital. And so after years of dealing with the same patient, he finally asked him, like, what's going on? Right? There's a little bit more than addiction here. Like, can you kind of, share with me what you think is going on? He goes, well, let me tell you how my life is like, right? He's like, I get clean. He goes, I go back to my old job as an executive, and I get my credit back up and running. My marriage is put back together. And then one night while my wife's sleeping, a voice will tell me, get in the car, right? Get in the car. Again, the obedience is the conjuring. It's not in, oh my God, I got the altar built. No, it's the building of the altar that you're being conjured. And so Jerry talks and he says, this individual gets behind the wheel of a car and he's being fed a download of directions. Turn left at the light, turn right, right? And then one case is, okay, where am I at? Well, you've been driving for 30 minutes at 2 a.m. Now you're in a cornfield. Pull over to the side of the road, kneel down, picks up a bag of cocaine. And then he starts the process, and then back in the hospital with voices. So this, again, I'm bringing this up because of how dangerous some of these entities can be when they allow you to believe you're in control. That is what happened. By the time the proto-intelligence manifested its intentions with him, it was too late. It had already accessed his mind. It had made decisions for him. And then you're in the hands of something that does not have your best intentions in mind.
Wow. So without going too deep then, because you touched on AI earlier, and I know it's something that really interests Chris, how much do you think devices, phones, computers, laptops, tablets are influencing the youth and leading them in the wrong direction with the aid of this unknown other? I mean, it's probably a difficult question to even answer. I don't, I've not really. You've made me think about it just now. I've really given it much thought, to be honest.
It kind of goes back to the question, who's piloting the pilot? Who's designing the designer? Is there, I read a case study the other day of an Uber driver who had no history of mental health issues, had a beautiful family, right? He's very successful at his job, and he's just driving his Uber. And from his navigation app comes a voice, starts to talk to him, calls him by name. He ends up committing some violent crimes. He's in prison now. No history of mental illness, but by virtue of technology, the phenomenon weaponized it and got him. So again, yes, this is John Keel is the Trojan horse, right? And that's why I believe it's important to have a background in this research to even talk about this stuff. Going back to some of the necromantic rituals in antiquity, the phenomenon had basically replicated itself by virtue of technology, and then handheld it, gave it to us as a species. We're thinking, right, technological advancements. They're thinking Trojan horse. I have now incarnated into your dimension, and I've allowed you to believe you're in control. And the whole time it's being manipulating us.
Thank you.
Yeah, very clever. Yeah, Alison's asking, Nathaniel, when it is said spirit enters the body and speaks through it, do you believe it can do this?
I'll give you, there's a very dark case study of Paulino's that I won't get to because it's very, very dark. But I will tell you, yes. Well, I guess this is a dark case study too. But one of mine, it was the murder case that I investigated. And the entity was grooming 2 high schoolers. And one was 12, the other one was 15. Well, when the 15-year-old went into the house, she had a pair of stub nose scissors and a knife. She's committing crimes. I won't go into it, obviously. But the family told me that she had a male guttural voice coming out of her. Her mouth wasn't moving. Something had literally worn her as a social skin and was stretching itself in her body cavity until it was coming out. Yes, absolutely can speak. 100%.
Oh, terrifying.
Absolutely frightening. So what about spiritualists? Well, let's do a question because I realise we've got about 15 minutes left. So,
yeah, talking about black-eyed children. Do you think they're demonic entities?
Yes, I'm not convinced they exist, but if they do, that would be it. With David Weatherly's cases, it's similar to what we're hearing on Ouija boards, right? Will you let me in? Will you let me in? And then by the time they enter through the threshold, it's over.
Yeah, you mentioned Nosferatu. The whole vampire thing just fit the analogy of it. It just fits, doesn't it?
Yes, but what is it, right? Obviously we have the legends, we have the lore, but what were vampires essentially, right? They fed on the secretions and excretions of our species in order to preserve its own, to save it from what's called extinction. And so by virtue of parasites. Yeah, Nosferatu in that movie, he told his the girl that he was after, he said, "I am but an appetite."
It's strange that you enjoyed the film. I didn't.
You didn't? Oh,
No.
Well, again, that's my background in the research. It was the classic Incubus through and through. Egotistical, extremely powerful. It's just, yeah.
You looked at it a lot deeper than me. I just saw this guy. He were off to meet. I can't even remember the vampire's name, but he were off.
Count Orlok.
Yeah. He were off to meet him, but suddenly he were there. He'd left England and he were there. And I wanted that transition. I wanted to see him getting on boat. And so there were a few gaps in film for me, but nothing to do with the part that you're looking at. So, but that's not for tonight. Sorry, guys. So come on, let's do another question, Chris.
Yeah, Andy's asking, are we coming to a major reset? I thought about this. It certainly feels like that. But then you've got to start wondering, as Nathaniel's talked about all throughout this, the whole situation is being manipulated. Even history, the lack of it, the reality behind it. So I think, some people say they feel it, like they just feel it inertly. They have this feeling about something. I do feel something, but I'm just wondering whether I am just feeling it because of everything that I'm aware of.
Just like a placebo feeling.
Yeah, and because I know that I shouldn't say the agenda. Look, there's many agendas, but the overall agenda is to make us feel like this. There is no feel good anymore. It's gone completely. And you could say like technology absolutely is vital to do that. But in general, the news, whatever it is, media in general. So I just feel that the whole situation, the threat of, what's the latest one's an asteroid, isn't it? That's the latest.
Yeah, that's actually funny. Did you see Lou Elizondo's interview on Julian Dory's podcast recently?
No.
He's building a bunker.
Oh,
I think it's in West Virginia. He's building a bunker for what is allegedly coming in 2027.
Yeah. Well, do you know what I read? Have you seen the TV series Silo?
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
The end was a heck of a thing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, but what if these underground bunkers are not for them? What if they're for us? And what if they want to live out their lives on this beautiful planet, and we're the ones living beneath it?
Makes sense to me, brother. We're in the catacombs again.
Obviously, that's not the. I don't want to put a spoiler out. That's not the scripts from Silo, by the way. It's just something else I came across recently. Tonya Morrison's asking, Crowley was deep, but in this singularity, chaos has its own ways. What do you think?
In terms of chaos magic, I think it's the same end, but it could very well just be manipulation. The rituals and that I've seen, at least some of these beings doing on the scan, the sigils, it's alien, and not in terms of extraterrestrial, but it's so different than what we're used to. Symbols that do not belong in our languages, and the way that they're connecting them to each other. I mean, that the remote view where the Star of David, a cross, and an Egyptian hieroglyphic, all intertwined.
Does that suggest then a new dawn as such then? Because the symbols that we would have thought of as unintelligible and not really understanding probably hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, are now understood. Are we looking at a new beginning, a new dawn?
I don't personally believe so. I do not believe that they're here to help us raise our consciousness, which I don't even know what that means. I do not believe they're trying to intentionally trigger an evolutionary change in us. Again, it seems to me like some of what they're doing does inspire evolution. That doesn't mean that was their intention. When you have somebody that's been assaulted, they're going to evolve to protect themselves. That doesn't mean the assaulter wanted that to take place. It's just the direct consequence of trauma. So that's where I stand with it.
So I'm mindful that we've probably got about 5 minutes left, have we, Chris?
Yeah, about 7 or 8 minutes, yeah.
And I'd just like to say, if you want to look at the Truth Proof on Sunday, the Truth Proof Interactive, please join us. And that's my last word, I think. So I'm going to leave it to Chris and Nathaniel.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about what did you just mention something? Then it just throw me off a little bit.
I'm good at that.
Oh, what was that? It was something to do with Musk, because I read something just recently. I mean, not
talking about the new dawn and
no, it was something to do with Elon Musk and the AI and the tech, and it's interesting as to whether or not where he wants to take this and whether it's related to this archontic force, because I still go back to like some of Ike's stuff about the archons and what he's actually saying. I'm of the inclination that I do think that there are other beings in various realities and dimensions that we interact with. But I do tend to think that this force isn't everything. I think this negative force is a parasitic force, like you said, Nathaniel. I'm totally in agreement with you. And as you say, you only have to look at its behavior over the ages to see that. The evidence is right there. And I wonder, this has come up a lot in ufology as well, whether this archontic force is doing the same in other realities to other species as well. Have you come across anything like that?
I haven't. I mean, I wish I had, it would make perfect sense. But the way it kind of hijacks our genetics and replicates through wombs and words, I don't see a reason why it wouldn't do that to another species. And perhaps, and I'm going to throw this out there, maybe this is the first species the phenomenon hacked, is what we're seeing in the graves. Maybe that's not, again, who's piloting the pilots? The consciousness within them may be really what we're researching, and the avatars they're inhabiting may just be another species that they hijacked. That's very probable.
This takeover that many people talk about, do you think that that it's never really happened in the sense that because that level of tech that they required wasn't present? Do you think? Because the reason I ask that, or is this a cycle that's happened before?
I think it may have happened before, and there's a reason there. I think that's why it keeps trying to update itself, update its new mask and incarnation, because it's like once we start to see what it's doing and get a glimpse of what they're trying to do in our reality, they just update the mask and incorporate everything else into it. You know, I think that's what they're doing, but it's not just that they're blending into reality. The archetypic presence was fabricating reality around us as a species to where we're thinking, again, this gets all throughout the literature, and incubi literature and ufology, where we're thinking that's a UAP. You know, that one video I talked to you guys about where it's an orb, it's a ball of light, and all of a sudden, no, it's not, it's a Cessna. So it's simulants, and it's all throughout the phenomenon. That's what makes this such a fascinating but disturbing pilgrimage, is because each and every time we think we have a glimpse of it, it can just dissolve into nothingness, and we're left with what we thought it was without any evidence.
It's fascinating. Do you know what Chris said earlier? Well, a few minutes ago, the level of tech is here now that we never had previously. So that must have an influence, the AI and everything. You know, absolutely.
Oh, 100%. Geordie Rose is he's a mathematician, I think, and he's helping them create what are called master computers. And he did a lecture on basically it was like technological demons, and he said that once these master computers are made, they're huge, that they would basically be the Ouija board to which would conjure other entities to manifest through that technology. And so this is why it's so problematic when we have conjurers, even today, in even the last week or last year, we have people who are going to the Joshua tree to perform the new Babylon working in hopes that they would encounter whatever these beings are. It's the old script. It's the same old phenomenon. It's reincarnating over and over again.
So you talk about the developing technology to enhance and bring forward the unknown
Whatever
other.
this is. Yes.
So it's almost as though the unknown other needs selected individuals who are more in touch and more in tune.
Yes.
So in essence, then, if what you're saying is correct, they can't just come through when they want to come through. They actually need us. So the symbiotic relationship.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yes, it's the door's locked. Here's the key. Throws the key at them, but you've got to unlock the door. Once you unlock the door, there's permissive will there. And this is so fascinating as well, because in incubi literature, there was only a few women that could actually see the entity. It's just like in ufology, right? Dr. Clark Turner had a case study of a family on a highway. I think it was a group of 5, and they see this UFO hovering over the highway, but there's only like 2 or 3 cars that stop. Everybody else is flying by at 60 miles an hour. They don't see it. And it's the same way, like even when they described what they saw, like only 2 of them agreed with what they saw. Everybody else saw something different. And so it does appear to be, it's not just the phenomenon grooms what wants to, but there's only a certain kinds of people that can actually see it. And that in itself could be an indication of parasitic invasion, because the first thing the enemy does is to make sure, right, who can see me when I'm invisible? Who can really discern my presence? And then when I have triangulated them, the rest will just take care of themselves.
It does make me wonder now, I think about that, whether, a lot of archaeologists and people that, they always ask, all right, if we had an ancient advanced civilization, where did the tech go? Well, maybe they destroyed the tech because of what on purpose. You know, I mean, just
Absolutely.
throwing it out there.
Yeah, we don't yet understand what's possessing people to its fullest. And likewise, I don't think we understand their nature and how they could possess technology. Again, the ancient necromantic ritual is called it's head magic or teraphim. It's the combination of memory and matter. We're looking at the matter because it's technology. We're not realizing it's been seeded with their memory. And so it is literally the replication of their consciousness in our technology. And it's malware, spyware. All they have to do is switch it on. It's just like the implants, you know. What is that? Again, when we're looking at ufology through the lens of materialism, it doesn't make sense. You know, when you have cases that the UFO itself has a soul in it, where did we hear that first? Necromancy. So it is through and through. And it does appear again that at least some of these entities are practitioners of another mystery school of a magic that we as a species are ignorant of. And my dear friends, it's being used against us.
Fabulous.
It's amazing, really, that it's being ignored in the way it is. You know, given the fact of the effect that it will have, that it's having. I mean, it's so evident now. I mean, just in the mental health world, look at the state of the place. Look at the state we're in. I mean, how long can people just keep ignoring this? It's baffling, really. There's, as you said, there's something blatantly more going on here.
Oh yeah, it's ramping up.
Yeah, but again, it's so deliberate. This pushing it to one side, and obviously the same. You know, it mirrors in ufology, doesn't it? Just push it to one side, just let it just unfold, and that's kind of how it feels, isn't it?
Hidden in plain sight, everything. It's just it's there, and I don't know what else I can say. Are you aware of the time, Chris?
Yep. We Well, look, mate, I've really enjoyed it as usual. You just get the cogs turning, and that's exactly why we asked you to come on. And I know for a fact that you have got the cogs turning in the chat because I've been watching it. So yeah, you've definitely got people, which is what Paul and I. That's our whole intention with this podcast. You just got two blokes from the north just throwing waffling stuff about, and then we get someone decent who knows what they're talking about, like you are.
You guys, I appreciate the opportunity. Like I said, you guys are like brothers to me, and I was blessed from God above to be able to eat and dine and hang out with you guys and just enjoy your company. So I appreciate the invitation. Again, if somebody disliked what I said, or just get the meat off and just throw the bones away, I guess.
It's been brilliant.
I think there's something for everybody in there to take from everything that you've said. And look, I think it's innovative and it's refreshing. So the only other thing I wanted to say is thanks to Lorraine for moderating tonight. I think you might have had a job on your hands from what I'm reading. But thanks for the super chat. So thanks, Karen, Cactus USA 64, brilliant. Martin, thanks very much. Stephen, thanks, and Lee, brilliant. And Martin Abbas, of course, Dr. Martin Abbas. We really appreciate your support as ever. Again, we don't ask for donations, but if you do donate, and I keep saying we're going to give something away, so we are going to give something away.
It's been great, absolutely fascinating as always. You give us all something to think about when we leave after listening to you talk, Nathaniel. So
just before we end this, guys, we're premiering on the last transmission. We're premiering Paul's cat investigation that he did recently. So that's on any minute now in the premiere. So stay tuned for that. If you haven't liked the videos or any of the videos that you liked and you have liked them, please like them and subscribe if you haven't. So once again, Nathaniel, thank you very much, mate. Really appreciate you coming on and really enjoyed it. So guys, we'll see you all next week. Paul, see you next week. See you next Friday. We're not going to guest on just as yet. So we may have by the time it comes around. So we'll see you guys soon.
Bye-bye.